The lecture hall's curved glass walls framed the void of space beyond, a slow-turning panorama of scattered stars and the glow of a distant nebula. Rows of tiered seating descended toward a raised podium where Commander Varix, dressed in the black and silver uniform of the Azel Dominion War Academy, stood with his hands clasped behind his back. His voice was a smooth rasp, the kind that could lull inattentive cadets into assuming they were safe in their ignorance. He recited the Dominion's victories as if they were scripture, campaign after campaign, where alien worlds had been pacified in the name of order. From the back row, Captain Arya Cade listened without moving. She wore a plain Navy uniform marked only by a small United Earth Defense emblem on her chest. No decorative pins. No rank displayed beyond what was required for entry into the academy. Her dark hair was tied back in a severe knot, and her expression gave nothing away, though she noticed the sidelong glances from the cadets around her. She didn't need to hear their whispers to know what they were saying. One of them, a broad-shouldered cadet with skin the color of burnished copper, muttered just loud enough for the row to hear. Humans don't even have proper fleets. Why is she here? Diversity requirement. Laughter rippled quietly among the others. Arya kept her gaze on the podium, pen scratching across her datapad, as though their words didn't reach her. If you think this is pity, she said without looking up, I'd hate to see your definition of mercy. The copper-skinned cadet bristled but said nothing, and the room settled into a low current of uneasy attention. Varix, oblivious or pretending to be, continued his lecture. His long fingers tapped a holographic display that spun out maps of contested sectors. Here, he said, zooming in on a cluster of colonies near the galactic rim, is Kestrel 3, a frontier outpost belonging to the species you know as human. Poorly defended, strategically insignificant, yet occasionally useful as a refueling point for Dominion patrol craft. In a conflict simulation, such an installation would fall within 3 standard hours. The class reacted as expected. Smirks, murmurs, even a low chuckle or two. Arya's pen stopped moving. Her eyes flicked up at the map, then back to the commander. The hollow in her chest, part memory, part reflex, tightened. Let's see it then, Varix said, initiating a wargame scenario. The hologram expanded into a tactical projection. Dominion ships appeared in formation, their approach to Kestrel, 3 plotted in confident arcs. The objective text glowed at the top, capture colony with minimal losses. Cadets straightened in their seats, the competitive air thickening. They divided into strike groups, calling out maneuvers in clipped bursts of their native tongues. The first volleys fired in simulated space, and on the mapped Kestrel 3's, shields began to collapse. Arya leaned back, hands resting lightly on her knees. She had seen this before, not the simulation but the real thing, in the darkness between stars where there were no pauses and no restarts. The cadets were overconfident, cutting too close to the asteroid belt without considering what might be hiding there. Even the simulation's algorithms wouldn't punish them for it, unless someone had altered the parameters. For a moment her mind pulled her elsewhere, back to the Black Ops briefing room, lit only by the pale glow of the tactical holotape. The Sigma-9 incident, they had called it afterward, though she knew it as the day the Dominion stopped laughing at Earth. She remembered her crew's faces, the steady hum of the stealth drives, the moment the enemy fleet entered the trap disguised as a crippled mining operation. They'd destroyed the Dominion armada without losing a single capital ship, though the price had been higher than most would ever know. Captain Cade, Varix said suddenly, snapping her back to the present. Would you care to comment on the defending fleet's performance so far? She met his gaze evenly. I'll reserve my assessment until the end, Commander. Simulations have a way of surprising people. The copper-skinned cadet laughed under his breath. She means we're about to surprise her. Arya's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. Let's hope so. The simulation clock ticked on. Dominion forces overwhelmed the colony's first defense line, and the cadets exchanged satisfied looks. But then the feed flickered. Small red blips appeared in the asteroid field. The Dominion ships moved in to investigate, and the simulation's AI triggered hidden variables. What the cadets had taken for background scenery ignited with missile fire, disabling the lead cruisers before they could retreat. Supply ships they had ignored lit up with weapons arrays, striking from behind. The projected casualty rate for the Dominion fleet spiked by 30% in seconds. Confusion rippled through the room. That's not in the training module, one cadet protested. Varix's brows drew together. Pause simulation. He scanned the interface, his fingers tapping in commands. This data set. Where did this come from? Arya set her pen down. Not a data set, Commander. A memory. She stood slowly, her gaze sweeping the room. What you're running isn't a theoretical. It's an exact replay of the Kestrel free engagement. My engagement. For a heartbeat, silence pressed down on the hall. The cadets exchanged glances, the earlier arrogance bleeding into something more unsettled. Even Varix seemed momentarily at a loss, his expression caught between skepticism and something harder to mask. I thought Kestrel free was a routine patrol skirmish, one cadet said. It was routine, Arya replied. For us. Her eyes met Varix's, and in them was the unspoken promise that the rest of the story would not be so comfortable to hear. The commander hesitated, then gestured for the simulation to resume. Arya sat, folding her hands. She knew exactly what would happen next. The simulated battle was already beyond saving for the Dominion. The outcome was inevitable, and with it, the first crack in the belief that humans were harmless. The clock ticked on. Outside, the nebula turned slowly in the dark, indifferent to the battles fought in its shadow. The Dominion ships in the simulation advanced again, but their formations were already ragged. The cadets tried to regroup, barking orders and shifting squadrons to plug the gaps, but the counterstrikes came too fast. The asteroid field spat more hidden batteries into play, ripping through escorts before they could shield the capital's ships. On the periphery, faint blue ripples flared, wormhole signatures. A swarm of unmanned drones poured through, flanking the Dominion's rear. The simulation's casualty markers flashed in steady rhythm. The cadets' voices grew louder, more frantic, as if volume could bend the outcome. Varix's face hardened. He had seen simulations glitch before, but this was too precise, too methodical. It wasn't a computer improvising, it was a mind. Arya sat still, her posture betraying neither glee nor pity. You're fighting blind, she said quietly, but the microphones carried her words to the whole room. You assumed your enemy was weak, so you didn't bother to learn them. That's why you're already dead. A few cadets shot her sharp looks, more insulted than chastened, but most stared at the projected battlefield as if it had turned against them. The copper-skinned cadet clenched his jaw, muttering a correction to his squad, but his hands were tight on the console. The wormhole drones shredded the Dominion's supply ships. Without fuel or munitions, the remaining cruisers faltered, forced to break formation and retreat toward the colony's edge. The simulation calculated the end, Dominion fleet annihilated in 14 simulated minutes. End scenario, Varix ordered, his tone clipped. The hologram collapsed into a frozen frame of wreckage and silent space. He looked at Arya. You claim this was your engagement. Prove it. Her eyes didn't waver. Pull the sealed after-action files for Sigma-9. A ripple went through the room, cadets exchanging puzzled, even nervous glances. Everyone knew Sigma-9 as a restricted classification buried deep in military archives. Varix hesitated, then keyed in a command, the war room's secure channel flickering to life. Lines of redacted text scrolled past, then grainy combat footage filled the display. They watched as real ships replaced the simulation's models, Dominion cruisers drifting into the same asteroid belt, human mining vessels waiting in apparent disrepair. Then the trap snapped shut exactly as it had in the sim, only this time the flashes of weapons fire and rupturing hulls were not stylized icons but raw, chaotic destruction. The Dominion ships burned silently in vacuum, their formations unraveling with every passing second. That's impossible, the copper-skinned cadet said under his breath. It's history, Arya replied. The Dominion called it an anomaly. We called it Tuesday. The comment drew a few startled laughs, not from humor, but from the dissonance of her calm delivery. She was not boasting. She was stating a fact that seemed to unsettle more than if she had gloated. Varix's gaze lingered on the final moments of the footage, where the Dominion flagship vanished in a sudden flare of light. This operation cost us 3 admirals, he said quietly. It cost us more, Arya said, and for the first time there was something heavy in her voice. But that's not in your records. He studied her for a long moment before closing the file. Tomorrow we run a fresh scenario. One of my choosing. No human colonies. No historical bias. We'll see if your memory holds up. The challenge hung in the air. Arya simply nodded. I'll be here. When the class ended, the cadets filed out in subdued silence. Conversations were clipped, eyes flicking toward her, and then away. The copper-skinned cadet lingered at the aisle, half turning toward her. If that was all real, he said, then maybe you're not here by mistake. Maybe, she answered, but her gaze stayed on the empty tactical display. That night, the Academy's great halls were quiet, save for the hum of climate systems and the faint resonance of distant ship engines. Varix remained at his office long after the lights dimmed, a single screen casting shadows across his face. He navigated through secure channels until he found something few in the Dominion dared to examine: archived human military history. He saw black and white footage of trench warfare, soldiers knee-deep in mud firing bolt-action rifles under relentless artillery. He saw fleets clashing in ancient oceans, great steel leviathans burning as they sank. He saw jungle campaigns, guerrilla ambushes, scorched earth retreats that lured enemies into killing zones. The time stamps leapt centuries, but the pattern remained: adaptation, escalation, endurance beyond reason. His hand hovered over the console before he shut the archive down. Alone in the dark, he found himself thinking not about the human ships, but about the calm in Aria's eyes when the simulation turned against them. The look of someone who had been here before, who already knew how the story ended. And he realized for the first time in years that he was curious, and just a little afraid, of what tomorrow might bring. The next day began with the low vibration of the Academy's structural shields cycling for calibration, a sound that thrummed faintly through the lecture hall's metal bones. Aria was already seated when the cadets arrived, posture precise, hands folded neatly on the desk in front of her. The night's silence hadn't softened their expressions. If anything, their curiosity had sharpened. Yesterday's humiliation lingered in the air like static. Varix entered without ceremony, his uniform immaculate, his expression unreadable. He keyed the console at the podium, and the room's lights dimmed as a new simulation bloomed across the tactical display. This time there was no human colony, no asteroid belt, no convenient environmental traps. The map was a clean expanse of space, dotted with a few neutral stations and a singular objective: control of the Taran Relay, a hyperspace junction coveted by every military power in the quadrant. "This will be your proving ground," Varix said, his gaze settling on Aria for a fraction of a second before sweeping the rest of the room. "Two sides. You will command the attackers. Captain Cade will command the defenders. No history, no home advantage, only skill." The cadets moved quickly, assembling their virtual fleets and debating formation choices. Aria's interface flickered to life, and her eyes moved with deliberate slowness over the map. She didn't rush to deploy ships. Instead, she studied the relay's traffic patterns, the density of nearby debris fields, the possible vector entries. Her fingers danced over the console, sending quiet orders to reposition unmanned sentry drones along unlikely approach corridors. The exercise began. The cadets' fleet surged forward, confident in their numbers. They split into 3 prongs, a maneuver so textbook it might have been lifted directly from the Academy's first-year syllabus. Aria's ships did not meet them head-on. She allowed one prong to reach sensor range of the relay before scattering her patrol craft into feints, pulling the cadets' formation apart in subtle increments. From the gallery, Varix watched her work. It wasn't brute force, it was tempo control. She never struck so hard that her position was exposed, never retreated so far that she appeared to yield. Every movement forced the cadets to adjust, burning fuel and attention. Frustration built quickly among the attackers. The copper-skinned cadet snapped an order to push through the central lane, hoping to crush her defenses in one decisive blow. That was when her hidden drones activated, firing precision bursts that crippled the lead cruiser's maneuvering thrusters. The cadet's fleet slowed, tangled in its own momentum, and her main force swept in from an oblique angle to tear through their supply ships. "Where are those coming from?" one cadet shouted. "They were always there," Aria said, her voice calm, almost bored. "You just never looked." By the 10th simulated minute, the attackers' logistical capacity had collapsed. The AI declared the defenders in control of the relay, scenario complete. The cadets sat back, some scowling, others staring at their consoles as though the defeat might resolve itself if they refused to blink. Varix ended the projection. "What did you learn?" he asked. "That she's impossible," someone muttered. Aria shook her head. "I'm predictable. The difference is, I decide what you think I'm going to do before you even start. That's strategy. Everything else is just shooting." Her words carried more weight than the quiet in the room could absorb. Even those unwilling to admit it felt the pull of her certainty, an authority rooted in experience rather than rank. Later that afternoon, Varix stood before the Dominion High Council. The chamber was a cavern of polished obsidian, its curved benches filled with the Empire's senior admirals and ministers. He presented his report without embellishment: 2 consecutive defeats at the hands of a single human captain in simulations designed to expose her weaknesses. Some council members laughed outright. Simulations are not war, one said. A human might win a game, but on the field. Varix cut him off, his voice sharper than intended. On the field, we have already lost ships to them. We dismissed it as chance. I no longer believe that. A minister with pale, translucent skin folded her hands. You're suggesting they are a strategic threat. I'm suggesting they are an existential one, Varix replied. The chamber erupted in overlapping voices: denial, indignation, speculation. Some dismissed his warning as paranoia, others demanded immediate countermeasures. The council chair brought the room to order with a single strike of his gavel. We will not alter our current course based on classroom theatrics. Preparations for the offensive will continue. This meeting is adjourned. Varix left the chamber with the distinct, bitter taste of inevitability in his mouth. They would not listen until it was too late. That evening, Arya walked the Academy's observation deck alone. Below, the planet's dark surface glimmered with scattered cities. She had heard enough through unofficial channels to know what the Dominion was planning. A massive offensive, a show of force meant to break humanity's will. They didn't yet understand that such a blow would only forge something harder in its place. Her reflection in the glass looked calm, but inside her mind was already assembling the counterstroke: routes, decoys, command chains. The war wasn't here yet, but was close enough to taste, and she intended to make sure the first move belonged to her. Somewhere in the Academy's upper levels, Varix reviewed the day's simulation logs again, his expression grim. The humans had been underestimated for the last time. Whether his superiors liked it or not, tomorrow would decide more than just who controlled a hypothetical relay. It would decide who truly commanded the future. The first strike came without warning. In the cold silence beyond the Cordis expanse, a Dominion vanguard translated out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their banners glinting under the pale light of a distant star. The fleet moved toward what they believed was an unguarded human logistics hub, a cluster of stations tethered together by fragile cargo tethers. From her command deck aboard the Eidolon, Arya watched their approach through a wall of holo projections. Her fleet was nowhere in sight, not to the Dominion, at least. Masked in the electromagnetic shadows of nearby debris fields, dozens of autonomous strike wings waited for her signal. Around her, the bridge crew worked in quiet precision, the hum of processors and the low murmur of status confirmations blending into the background. "Range to primary formation?" she asked without looking away from the projections. "Closing to intercept vector in 4 minutes, her tactical officer replied. She gave a slow nod. "Initiate ghost relays. Let them think we're retreating." Out in the expanse, false energy signatures bloomed, simulating the movements of a withdrawing human fleet. The Dominion's commanders took the bait instantly, tightening pursuit lines, focusing all scans ahead instead of around them. Arya tracked their paths, the calculations unfolding like a pattern she had memorized long ago. The Dominion admiral, a broad, scar-shelled figure named Kareth, sat at the center of his flagship's command sphere, smirking as the retreating signals grew fainter. "They're running," he said to no one in particular. Just like the archives said they would. The first blow shattered that certainty. From the shadow of an asteroid cluster, a swarm of human drones erupted, their weapons flaring in synchronized bursts. The lead Dominion cruisers buckled under the onslaught, engines tearing apart before they could maneuver. Kareth's smirk froze. On the Eidolon's deck, Arya's voice was steady. "Target command and control relays. Leave the hulls intact if possible." The strike craft obeyed, slicing through the Dominion's communication lattice. Orders faltered, coordination dissolved. Ships began firing blindly, some colliding as they tried to reposition. And then the second wave arrived, human capital ships unfolding from micro-wormholes directly into the Dominion's rear, cutting off retreat vectors with surgical precision. Kareth's voice rose to a shout across the tactical feed. "All ships break." The transmission collapsed into static. Varix, seated at an auxiliary console aboard the Eidolon, glanced at Arya. "You could end them here. All of them." She didn't answer immediately, her eyes on the feed where damaged Dominion cruisers drifted powerless. Finally she said, "Ending them is easy. Changing them is harder." The Dominion fleet's resistance crumbled. Without fuel or orders, they surrendered in pockets, jettisoning weapons and broadcasting distress signals. The battle had lasted less than an hour. Across the sector, news of the defeat spread faster than Aria's ships could move. Dominion frontier worlds declared neutrality. Vassal states quietly severed ties. Entire fleets mutinied rather than face what the survivors now described, not as a battle, but as a dismantling. By the time Aria's fleet entered Dominion capital space, resistance was symbolic. A formal delegation awaited her, led by the council chair who only weeks before had dismissed her species as strategically irrelevant. His voice trembled as he offered terms of surrender. Aria listened without interruption, then gestured toward Varix. You will serve as liaison to the new Interstellar Council. Your voice will carry weight among your own, and you'll report directly to us. Varix's jaw tightened, but he bowed his head. It will be done. Kareth, brought forward under guard, met her eyes with the raw defiance of someone who had lost everything but pride. Why not kill me? I would have killed you. She stepped closer, her tone calm but unyielding. Because fear makes empires reckless. Respect makes them cautious. You'll live to explain to your people why the galaxy now runs differently. Later, in the stillness of her private quarters, she stood before the viewport, watching the slow rotation of a gas giant beneath its ring of shattered moons. Her reflection in the glass was sharp-edged, the lines of her face marked by the weight of a war she hadn't wanted but had been prepared to win. She thought of the Academy lecture hall, the cadets who had laughed at her presence, the simulations that had been dismissed as games. Now those same tactics had rewritten the balance of power. Humanity, once overlooked, was awake, and the galaxy would never again sleep easily. Somewhere in the dark, new frontiers waited. Aria knew the battles ahead might not be fought with weapons alone, but with diplomacy, patience, and the constant vigilance of a species that had learned the cost of underestimation. Her voice was almost a whisper, meant only for herself. We didn't want this war. But now that it's ours, we'll decide how it ends.